morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and love. Good, good, good morning, sun. Good, good, good morning. Good morning. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and love. Good, good, good morning, sun. Good morning, life. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and love. Good morning, sun. Good morning, sun. Good morning, life. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and in love.
Oh, wrong monitor. There we go. Gonna give away all my secrets. Good morning. Hope you're having a good weekend. I was just collecting random thoughts that seem to converge, as they often seem to do, randomly last week, and it has resulted in this, because that's how it's always been done, right? Like, we've all heard that, right? Especially if you've been in the business process consulting space, the ERP space. If you have been involved with a business, you have heard the phrase, because that's how it's always been done. Okay, so let's start with something that just randomly, not randomly, but it was unusual. So I got an email from a service called Instacart, and they're in the US. I don't know where else they are, but they're in several states in the US, and they're a grocery delivery service. So you go online, you pick out your groceries from whatever store you want, and it can be, supplies from a hardware store even, or they go to all sorts of stores now. And I got this email from Instacart, and they deliver it to you, by the way. So I got this email from Instacart. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. That looks like some really good food. And it says, celebrate Diwali with us. And I thought, what is Diwali? How do I celebrate it? Like, that looks pretty good. There's like awesome looking food. There's flowers. It says festivals of lights. I'm like, I'm in. And it says, we can help you prep for this year's festivities, whether it's your first Diwali or your yearly tradition. Now, I didn't know what's going on here, but I'm like, yes, please. Like, that looks pretty darn tasty. So I started to try to learn about what is Diwali. And I don't know if I'd heard of it before, but it turns out that I am less than a mile away from Little India, the Little India area, small neighborhood, I guess, shops and street in Los Angeles. And so in Los Angeles County, there's a Little India, and it's like 2 or 3, maybe 3 blocks, 4 blocks of shops and restaurants and stores. They have the sweet store, they have the Indian restaurant, they have the stores that sell the saris and the traditional Indian outfits. And it's a fascinating little neighborhood just tucked into this city called Artesia, California. And so it's neat to go there and eat and stroll down the street, and it's very foreign to me. I don't they look at me like, what is this guy doing here? When I went there to buy garam masala once, and I'm like trying to say, yeah, I want this stuff called garam masala, and they just looked at me like, what? I don't understand. It was quite entertaining. So, yes. So that is right near me. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I started looking into this, and it looks pretty awesome. Like I I don't know if I'm eligible to participate in this festival, but like people hanging out, lighting candles, and I found this photo. It's like, wow, check that out. The entire river is just lit up. It is gorgeous. So if you search for Diwali celebration, just these amazing, beautiful photos of all the activities and traditions and festivals, and I guess they have fireworks and candles and great food, and I'm like, that sounds awesome. And kind of I grew up in the U.S., typical holidays, Easter, Halloween, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, things like that. This is completely new to me. And so then I'm like, okay, well, what Indian holidays are there? And it's not holidays, it's holidays, because holy cow, India knows how to have holidays. Because if you search for this list, I found this on the timeanddate.com website. There's holidays, and then there's holidays, and then there's holidays, and then there's holidays. They do not joke around. Like, if there is a country that is a professional holiday observer, I mean, that is awesome. Now, with that said, apparently most people do not celebrate all of these holidays. So I was kind of bummed to learn that. I thought, wow, like I would move to India and I would celebrate all these holidays. That would be fantastic. But apparently that's not how it's done. And it could be by region, by religious observation, tradition, I guess various factors. So there's the standard national holidays, and then there are these smaller regional or specific holidays that various people observe. So I thought that was interesting. And Steve, why are you talking about this? Well, because I thought it was cool. And also because it talks to tradition, right? Holidays are very much about tradition. So in the United States, we have this Thanksgiving tradition. I guess Halloween is a tradition we just had. We have Christmas, we have New Year's, we have Easter, and we have other national holidays like Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Labor Day, St. Patrick's Day, things like that. So, these are all traditions that we've adopted as holidays, and we have fun, or we celebrate, or we observe, sacrifice, things like that. So, okay, those are cultural or national or traditional things. What about business traditions? And you're like, that's a weird topic. But really, what is a business tradition? Well, it's something you do in your business that you've been doing for a long time. And oftentimes it's just something that people do that if you ask them, why do you do that? They would say, because that's how it's done. That's how it's always been done, right? And you say, well, why? Because that's how it's told to do it? Well, why were you told to do it? And eventually you'll get to, I don't know. That's just what I do, right? So this could apply to business processes, office procedure, employee training, because if you have a process and a procedure, well, naturally, that's how you're going to train new employees. Well, this is how we do it. This is how we do X. This is how we do Y. This is how you're going to process this transaction. This is how you're going to sell something. This is going to how you're going to stock the warehouse, whatever it is, right? Well, when that's how a process occurs in business, what happens with their business systems, their software? Well, the systems and software get tailored or customized to cater to those processes or traditions or procedures or whatever you want to call it. So you have customizations, you have integrations, and just within the software, the standard functionality, you do things a certain way. Maybe you could do things 5 different ways, but this particular way is what was chosen to meet the needs, the supposed needs of the business at the time it was implemented, right? Well, how often does that change? Not often. And so oftentimes you have this massive corporate or organizational inertia that has you continuing to do the business process and the business software the same way year after year after year. Well, businesses do change, but do those processes change? Not necessarily. And guess what happens when you have a new business process? Oh, we're selling this new product out of this location with this sales team with these terms and conditions in these sales contracts. Well, guess what? All of that new conversation is in some form or fashion constrained by the old traditions and processes and practices and systems that already exist. You're rarely just completely reinventing your existing business based on this new product you're selling. So there's all of these assumptions built into this new business process. So you may regularly hear, oh, we're selling this and we need to do this. Well, we can't do that because our system doesn't support that type of contract. Well, we want to have these terms for these customers. Well, we have a credit check department. We can't just give this customer these terms without a credit check, right? And they need to fill out this application. Well, I want to be able to sell right away. Well, sorry, this takes 3 to 5 days to complete this vendor or customer validation process. And so you have all these weird organizational constraints that you can rationalize and justify because they've occurred over many years, but that is constraining the new business processes. So I ramble. So let me tell you a story. I was at a customer and the customer said, well, I do this. And I'm like, okay, can you show me how you do this? And they said, well, sure, I have it documented. I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's fantastic. You have this business process documented. And they dig through their desk and they pull out this pile of paper. And I look at this and I'm like, count the pages. It was 13 pages long. And I said, wait a minute. This is like some little simple process that you do every day. They're like, yeah. Why do you have 13 pages to tell you some simple process you're doing every day? So then we started to review it. Well, you see, first, we have to download the file, which means going somewhere and finding this file and downloading it through whatever process was required. But then we're not done. We've got to move the file because the file's over here. We need to put it over here because that file can't be there. It needs to be over here. And so, okay, so then what do you do? Well, see, when I download the file, it's named this, but after I move the file, that name no longer works. So I've got to rename the file. Okay. And then what? Well, I need to edit the file. Wait, what? You just got the file. Why would you need to edit? Well, the file's in the wrong format. It's got the wrong data. I need to open it up, add this column, change these values to make it work with this system. Okay. And then what? Well, then I have to launch my ERP system and log in and go to this window or this screen and pull up this menu and click this button or whatever to get it ready. Okay. And then I need to launch this separate import tool, which then reads the file that I've renamed and edited in this other location because that's all it's set up to do is look in this one place for this one file in this one format. And then I run the import. But before I run the import, I actually need to change these settings because every time I run it, these settings need to be updated, like say the date or the batch or my username or whatever the case is, so that it runs properly this time, which is different than last time. And then finally I can run the import. And then you're done, right? Oh no, then there are errors. Okay. And what do you do then? Well, then I have to read the log, find out what the errors are. Then I have to go fix the errors. And then I have to go through and do this whole import process again. And then I do this every single day. And I looked at this like, you have got to be kidding me. A consultant or developer, someone semi-technical, set up this entire process for this end user who didn't understand any of the individual steps. They were just following the 13 pages of instructions methodically because guess what? If they missed any one of those steps, this entire process would not work. So they had to follow all the steps, all 13 pages. This was considered acceptable because that's what the employee was told to do. That's what the employee was trained to do. That's what they were handed. This is a business process that was ingrained into this department, into this guy's day. This poor guy was doing this every single day. 99% of this, probably 100%, was zero value to the business organization. This could have been fully automated if the person who invented this process had bothered to take the time to realize that there's zero value in this process. This was a business tradition, a 13-page business tradition that this employee unthinkingly completed every single day of his working life. It was not good. Question, is this acceptable? It works. Yes, it's possible. The employee was able to do it. He was able to follow the instructions, all 13 pages of it, and get it done. Is this acceptable? I would argue no. I would argue this is a horrible business process. There is no technical reason for it to exist. And it could just be that the consultant who set this up didn't have the capability to perform the scripting and automation necessary in order to fully automate this process, because they were used to the particular tools that they knew, right? It was their tradition as a business process consultant to know this tool, and they knew how to click these buttons, and they knew how to copy and paste. They didn't know how to automate this. They were at the limit of their knowledge, which is fine. That happens to all of us. But I would argue this is not acceptable. And ideally, that consultant should have said, whoa, yeah, this can be automated. Let me kick this up to someone who understands how to take this to the next level. Now that we've prototyped this, right? It's fine to prototype this way. You figure out how this process works. Well, then you got to take the next step and automate it. Like, get rid of this. This is meaningless. So let's take a little bit of a turn here and go from business processes to developers. Just as these types of things affect people who are in an office and perform typical business processes every day, this greatly affects developers, particularly new developers, because they're just walking into this thinking, okay, what do I need to do? And someone tells them what to do, whether that's a blog, a video, a training course, a workshop, whatever the case is, a book. And so Don Kelly had a tweet that I think Matthew Perrin retweeted, and I saw. As someone new to tech from outside industries, setting up dev environments is a big challenge. It's a reminder there's base level knowledge I am missing. It seems like a really stupid barrier to entry if someone understands the code, but not the environment setup stuff. Absolutely. And if you disagree with this, like, I'll try to demonstrate that there is a problem that you're blind to if you're not agreeing with this. Because if you've had to set up multiple development environments in multiple languages, platforms, it can be a nightmare. Like, anytime I get on a Linux machine and it says, oh, you just compile this C code, oh boy, I instantly know now it's impossible. And I recently did this with an application, and the guy was trying to be clever and show how smart he was. He's like, we're smart. We're just going to compile this because that's how it's done to get the latest version. And then what does he do? He says, oh, you need to install these 37 precompiled dependencies in order to make this one thing work. It's like, come on, dude. You just contradicted your entire point. And there's so many dependencies in development environments. It gets really complex. And stuff just doesn't work. Some very lucky people are successful. But then take 6 months later, use those same set of instructions. Often they just won't work because there's one thing that's broken. So she goes on, it's insanely frustrating. I'm following all the steps and getting this message I have to update the BIOS. Go read about it because I've never done this, and everything I read is like, if one thing goes wrong, enjoy your new brick. Now I'm scared to touch it. I totally understand. There's some context here, right? She's not comfortable with updating BIOS. Like, wait, she's trying to write code, and now she's having to update her BIOS? Like, what's going on? And so people are asking these questions like, what do you mean update BIOS? That sounds crazy. Like, I don't believe you is kind of the implication. Like, are you sure? What's going on? What are you talking about? And so someone empathizes. I've been at it for like 5, and I'm trying to understand this thread as well. Like, what's going on? I've been at it for 5 years now. I still have trouble with WSL. I'm like, what? What's going on? Getting started, tried VMs, helpful, but ultimately I found dual booting Linux was the simplest. And I'm like, okay, what am I missing? And so then someone says, are you programming on a Windows machine, trying to figure out like, what's the problem? And she says, yes, I think I missed the WSL thing, so I fixed that now and I'm trying again. And then the light bulb went on in my head. I think I know what she's dealing with, because guess what? I dealt with the exact same issue 2 weeks ago or a week ago. Can't even remember. I tried to install Windows subsystem for Linux on my Windows 10 machine. I never used it before. And so someone told me, oh, it's pretty good. I'm like, okay. And I saw some Scott Hanselman videos on it. It's like, oh, that looks pretty slick. At least with Windows 11 WSL2, it looks super slick the way Scott showed how it works in Windows 11. So I thought I'd try it on Windows 10. Well, I know what she's talking about. This is what happens if you try to install this on, in my case, a brand new AMD PC. You can read the instructions. They'll say, oh, you need to have the virtual machine platform enabled or installed. And I didn't need to do that on Windows 10, at least my version of Windows 10. I didn't need to deal with that. So I completely skipped past that, completely oblivious to that potential requirement. But I just got this blank command prompt window thing with Ubuntu at the top. And I didn't grab a screenshot, but it was something like this. And it says, please enable virtual machine platform Windows feature and ensure virtualization is enabled in the BIOS. And I'm like, what? I mean, I've been working with Windows and virtualization and Hyper-V and built my own machines. I know BIOS pretty well. And I'm like, what is going on? So I'm having a search for this and it says enable virtualization in your BIOS. I'm like, I don't get it. So I'm looking around and I find some other posts and Reddit forums and threads that say, like, what is this? So it seems there's some setting that needs to be enabled, most likely only on some machines with some BIOSes that have this turned off by default. I was the lucky winner to get such a machine that I built, or actually my daughter built for me a few months ago. So I start looking into this and I'm like, I don't see it. I don't know where this is. Well, duh, it's the SVM mode. Come on, Steve. How do you not know what the SVM mode is in your BIOS? Like, hello? All you're trying to do is install WSL for Windows. How hard can this be? Well, you see, I had to look this up because it varies based on your motherboard, your BIOS, your processor. I have no idea. So I had to look this up. Like for my particular motherboard manufacturer and current BIOS, I have to go into the BIOS, which fortunately I know how to do. I've done it before, but it's not in normal mode. You have to go into advanced mode in order to even see this option. That's why I didn't see it. I have to go into advanced mode and then maybe try Control F1, whatever that is, because it's not obvious how to get into advanced mode. And I can attest this was by no means obvious. And I know the BIOS fairly well. Once you go into advanced mode, you need the MIT tab. Like, what? Now, like, it's like motherboard intelligent tweaker. Like, what a horrible name. They call it MIT. And this is, I guess, a gigabyte motherboard BIOS thing. So then, once you're in MIT advanced settings, MIT tab, you need advanced frequency settings. Like, what? And advanced CPU core settings. Now, is this really the place that a developer, a new developer is trying to learn this, really needs to be going? Like, I empathize with her plight. On this tab, you need to select SVM mode and turn it on. This will enable virtualization. Now, if anyone tells me that SVM mode under advanced CPU core settings, under advanced frequency settings, under the MIT tab of the advanced mode of my BIOS is a typical setting that anyone should understand how to use, I would disagree. And only after you change this setting, and if you're new to BIOS, I understand you will be very nervous, only after you do this and reboot, do you hope that under Windows Task Manager, you then see that virtualization is enabled for Windows. That is bonkers. Like, how is this acceptable? Now you say, well, it's not Windows. It's not WSL's fault because it relies upon Hyper-V. It's not Hyper-V's fault because Windows needs access to this virtualization technology, which is hardware. And, well, the motherboard manufacturer, for whatever crazy reason, this is not enabled by default. And so they've got to put it somewhere. And so there's some engineer who writes BIOS who thought it was a good idea to bury this option 12 levels deep under double, triple advanced settings and called it SVM mode. Absolutely bonkers. And so I got a response. Well, Steve, that's how all development environments are. Have you ever tried to set up XYZ development environment? Or what about this development environment? Or this dev platform? Or this server infrastructure? That's how they all are. No. Wrong answer. That is not how all development environments are. And let me show you an example. Studio 4. Oops, I just deleted myself. Maybe that's a good thing. Studio 4. This is Replit. Replit.com. Oops, now I got logged in. Didn't mean to do that. So this is Replit.com. If I can go home. Okay, I'm already logged in. So yeah, this is a development environment. Okay, let me just close it to see if I can reproduce. Replit.com, step 1. Log in, step 2. Step 3, I want a new Python project. I click. Step 4, I start writing code. This is in a browser. I didn't set up a server. I didn't install anything. Print, hello world, run. Hello world. That is how long it took me to set up a full-fledged Python development environment. I opened a browser. I clicked sign in. I clicked Python. I'm writing code. That is how it should be done. I should not have to install 57 dependencies just to learn how to code. It's absurd. And if you think it's not absurd, you really need to question your assumptions and everything that's going in that mindset. These people said it is crazy how hard it is for people to just learn how to write their first line of code. And I've tried to do this on Windows. Microsoft has a 23 video series on learning Python. I think the first 3 videos are dedicated to just getting Python installed on a Windows machine. 3 entire videos you got to get through before you write your first line of Python or understand the first thing about Python. It's not even a conversation about Python. It's like, oh, Python's over there, but first here, let me take you a tour on how to set up your dev environment. Replit, 3 or 4 clicks. This is how it should be. Replit is killing it. You can have fully hosted environments running Replit to learn how to code, to prototype. I think there are even people doing semi-production systems in Replit. It's amazing. Now, VS Code, GitHub, Visual Studio, Microsoft, and others are working on moving the development environment to the browser. But guess what? A language extension is not there yet. I don't know that there ever will be due to I think there's some Windows interactions, Windows dependencies, file system dependencies. So when you download symbols, for instance, you've got all those files involved. I don't know how easy or difficult that is to solve, but this is how development environments should be. You should have no development environment. It shouldn't exist. I can pull up this browser from Tahiti and start coding, right? Doesn't matter what computer I'm using, doesn't matter where I'm at. There are no dependencies. It's just a browser with internet connection and a sign-in. That's how it should be. So question the assumptions. And why would someone assume that certain things have to be certain ways? Well, this is probably not the correct technical distinction, but I'll generally refer to the term cognitive blindness. And we all have this, right? I looked this up, and there are various permutations and variations on this. Inattentional blindness, motivated cognition, confirmation bias. And so there are all these things that feed into our assumptions that these traditions have to be a certain way because that's how it's always done. That's how this happened. That's how that happened. That's how they do it. And so you assume that's how it has to be. No, it doesn't have to be that way. And so, for lack of a better term, there's a concept called reframing. No, reframe the entire conversation to that's how it's always been to that's horrible. There needs to be a better way. Reframe it and start over. And that may take some work, but it's worth it. So here's an example of that. In one of my videos, Learning BC Development Season 2, I was trying to do something very simple. I was just trying to launch VS Code and start writing some very basic AL. I had just launched Visual Studio Code before starting the live stream. I had one copy with my sample code that I had already written, like the cooking show, ta-da, right? I had a second copy of VS Code that I had just opened prior to starting the live stream. Like I was all ready, right? Well, when I started to do this live, what happened? This is the error message I got. Command AL-GO resulted in an error. Command AL-GO not found. Like, wait, what? I just prepped this last night. I just opened Visual Studio. Like, what's wrong? So my only solution, I was like, okay, well, I've seen these bizarre things with extensions before. Like I tried to do Azure Functions in VS Code. It took me 4 hours just to get things to work without having errors spewing out at me. So I found that I've repeatedly had to uninstall an extension, then reinstall it, and then it magically starts working. I don't know why. And so that's what I did. And sure enough, that solved it. It's absurd. And so I posted this on Twitter, and the response generally was, why didn't you reload the window? Duh. VS Code, F1, developer : reload window. What? Like, why would that even occur to me? Like, in what world is that the normal sequence of operations that I launch Visual Studio Code, I try to do something, I get an error, and then, oh yes, that's right, I just launched it, I get an error, therefore I should reload it. No. It didn't even occur to me. I'm like, why? Now, maybe that'll work. I don't know. But I would argue that's the wrong question. Reframe it. Why is this error even appearing? Like, what developer in what context thought that this was an appropriate and meaningful error message for anyone? And Eric Hogard has a good video where he's like, stop telling me what's wrong. Start telling me how to fix it. This offers me nothing. If it said, hey, I don't know what's wrong, try the reload window command and maybe that'll fix it. Okay, try uninstall, reinstall. At least that would tell me what to do. This tells me nothing. So assuming a new developer should understand that they should be reloading VS Code when this happens, wrong assumption, totally backwards. The question should be, why is this error even remotely acceptable? This is a bug. This is a problem. Find out what's causing this. Focus on that. Don't blame the idiot developer like me that I didn't think of reloading the window. Like, I'm clueless, but I'm not that clueless, right? So, yeah, and Sasha Herman, it's the most used command in Visual Studio Code, right? Like, what does that tell you? That developers are trained like Pavlovian dogs to know that, oh, when something bizarre, unexplained, inexplicable occurs in VS Code, oh yes, That's my clue that I should run this command that is horribly named called reload window that doesn't reload the window. It actually restarts VS Code very quickly. The fact that that command even exists, what does that tell you about the traditions of software development that went into developing the product called VS Code by a multi-billion or trillion multinational company? How sad is the state of development that that is an acceptable thing that a developer should be expected to do? Like, I feel like I've just entered the asylum. And there's a good book on UI design and UX design. I forgot the author. It's The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, essentially, about how developers are the ones developing UI and UX for business products. No, developers are not the people who should be designing UI and UX. You should have UI and UX designers telling the developer how they should develop them. This is an example of developers doing what they do. Wrong. Reframe the entire conversation. Do not ask, why, new developer, did you not do this? Ask, why is this even remotely acceptable? Here's another one. This literally just happened to me while I was trying to prepare for this stream. Welcome to Business Central. See this? This is Business Central. No, it's not, Steve. That's not Business Central. That's a gray square. Nope. I loaded Business Central, I logged in, and this is literally what I saw. This is Business Central. That's what it looks like. And I was like, what? Did I click the wrong button? No, it's a shortcut saved in my browser. Am I not logged in? No, I wasn't even prompted. Like, it should be using my login. What's going on? And I sat there for 10 seconds staring at this gray square in a blank browser window like, did I break Business Central? I was thinking, is Business Central down? No. What did I not see when my browser was there as I'm trying to prepare other stuff? Steve, duh, you should have seen the spinny thingy. Because spinny thingy is good. That's what developers do. They put a spinny thingy that I could barely even see. It took me several seconds to even notice that it was there. I'm like, wait. The Business Central team, who I know are very smart people, wrote an application that when it's sitting there loading for over 10 seconds, I see a gray blank web page. I have no idea what's going on. And I'm supposed to notice that there is a little tiny, faint, semi-transparent spinny thingy in the center of my 24-inch monitor. This is all that is wrong with software development. This is personification of bad development practices. Put loading, like, tell me what's going on. Yeah, buffering, exactly, Samuel. Like, bad. Don't blame the user for not noticing this. Blame the developer for even thinking this is remotely a good idea. Like, I'm pontificating, but seriously? Is this the state of software development, like cutting edge modern web development in the year 2021, that this is the best we can offer users? No. If I went into Business Central, or a user goes into Business Central and every 10 transactions generates an error, and you tell them, oh, you need to close Business Central, log out, relaunch, and log back in, is that acceptable? Just like the VS Code example? No, that's absurd. So question the status quo, question the tradition. That's always the way it's been, is not good enough. Don't accept the norm. Question the assumptions, question the default, question processes, question software tradition, look for opportunities to improve, and do not let bad software habits dictate new software design. If you've been around and listened to me rant, you may know that I'm not a fan of the horrible hamburger icon. Some genius came up with this idea to have 3 lines in the corner of an application, and someone called it a hamburger, and some UI developer patted themselves on the back for this brilliant economical use of space. It's horrible. And guess what? Well, then someone else said, oh, that's new and novel. Let me put that into my application. And now it's taken off and everyone does it. It's not good UX. Don't let someone else's bad software habits that have been done for 6 months or 6 years dictate the new software design. It just like stop, pause, and think for 5 seconds. Like, is a user really going to enjoy this experience? That's all it takes. And if you actually watch a user, they'll be like me, like, why do I have a gray web browser? Is Business Central down? Oh, I need to wait 10 seconds in order to know that Business Central is not down, and then my page eventually slowly loads. Not good. It's not the standard that we should have for software, I think. So, with that very long-winded rant, that's what I've been thinking about for the last week. That started with Diwali, started with holidays and traditions. And we had a segue over to development environments and WSL and my shared experience in that fun event. And then moving into VS Code being terribly designed, and then my blank Business Central browser window. So this is everywhere. Like, I didn't even have to try to find this stuff, and just getting ready this morning, it popped up yet again. So it's everywhere. So just pause, stop asking the common question, start asking a different question, like, why is this acceptable? So with that, have a good weekend, and go write some good software that is enjoyable to use. Cheers.
Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Jeeps